On Story is brought to you in part by the Alice Clayburgh Reynolds Foundation, a Texas family providing innovative funding since 1979. On Story, presented by Austin Film Festival, a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers and filmmakers. In this week's On Story, the Revenant screenwriter Mark L. Smith.
I've always felt that a writer's job is to give the director what he's looking for. And, I've done stuff with Chris Nolan and with Ron Howard, a lot of different people. So I'm just kind of there. It's almost like a tool, it's just, I'm there to get them to the point that they want to be.
In this episode, Mark L. Smith discusses collaborating with Alejandro Iñárritu on bringing a harrowing true story to life in the Academy Award-winning Frontier epic.
They sent me a book. The producers, Anonymous Content, sent me, they had the novel. They had optioned the rights to the novel. And it was going to be kind of tough to write, to adapt. And so they asked me originally to go around and pitch the studios with it. And so I played around with what my pitch would be, about, in the middle of this frozen, cold, desolate landscape and a guy that, our lead character hardly ever speaks. And it's just kind of brutal and everything. And I started imagining all the studio execs' faces, when they hear this pitch. So I told Anonymous Content, I said, I'll just write it on spec, So I wrote it on spec. And because there was something about the character that I just really kind of attached to.
Remind me, when you did that first, when were you first approached by Anonymous? What year was that?
It was 2007. Yeah. And then it was 2010 when Alejandro came on. And then he and I worked on drafts together. Leo had kind of attached, and then Alejandro and I started working on stuff, and then the financing came together for Wolf of Wall Street, so it put a pause, and then Alejandro got to go do Birdman, which kind of worked out for him. So,
how did you weigh the need to stick to the historical facts of Hugh Glass's life, or how the book presented this story versus the need to basically tell the best story for the best movie?
Yeah, from the beginning, my very first draft, I really used primarily the bear attack, Hugh Glass, Fitzgerald, those characters, and set up just that world, and then the main event, which is the bear attack, and then his pursuit of Fitzgerald, which was all factually accurate. Everything else I just kind of created because I felt like the world, trying to make it a little more cinematic, a little more, movie friendly, because the true story isn't quite as, compelling after a certain point. So I made some changes there. I'd never seen the end result, and it was one of the screenings in New York before it opened. But we're watching it. I just leaned over to Alejandro. I said, "Man, I'm a really good writer," because so much of that, again, it was not the writing. I mean, the writing. I broke down the attack to a certain point and everything, but it was so Alejandro and so Chivo and so Leo, and it was. And what Alejandro did that was so smart was the way I wrote it. You would see Glass getting attacked, and you'd hear a gunshot or whatever, and I would cut then to the group coming to help him. Then you're back to Glass again, another action. Then you're cutting to them, and they're going through. But Alejandro took out all those cuts, and it was so smart because by removing all the other stuff, you're never allowed to escape. And it was such a genius thing that he did. And even to Glass stabbing as they rolled down the hill and the bear landing on top of him at the end, kind of hiding his body, that was in the very first draft I wrote. And so it's important because those things, they matter. Whenever you need somebody to, you want them to keep turning the page, you can't kind of cheat on the action. In order to trying to establish that the world at that time, that environment was just survival. And there was, not as much good and bad as much as everyone had, everyone was just trying to get by. Everyone was trying to live to the next day and do what they could, including, the bears and everything else.
In an early draft of your script that I've read, there's more emotional meaning for Glass because you connect the rifle to a backstory of his son having died before the main story takes place. And then in the film that we see now, Glass has a Pawnee son, Hawk. So I was wondering, how did you ultimately arrive at the idea of giving Glass a Pawnee son and making the story more about Glass avenging his son's murder?
Yeah, all my drafts until Alejandro and I started working together, they were all based. I'd never seen it as a revenge story. I guess I'm not revenge is kind of empty to me. So I didn't really want to go down that road. So I built it around more almost a kidnapping. And so in my early drafts, we opened with just a father's hands and his son, and they're carving into the stock of a rifle, a hunting rifle. And you hear the boy's sick, and you hear him kind of coughing, and you understand that he's dying. And as they're doing this carving, he gets a little splinter, a drop of blood goes into the rifle, kind of seeps into the carving. So that was my opening, and then we kind of move forward, we dissolve, and we're now with Glass, current time, and he's holding that rifle, and it's worn and battered, and it's years later, but he's still got that same rifle. So my story was that whenever Fitzgerald left him to die, Fitzgerald took his rifle. And so by taking his rifle, he took kind of the only bit of humanity Glass had left, the only connection he had left to his son. So it was like Fitzgerald took his son. So that's what I was going after. So it became this journey to where it was less about killing Fitzgerald or taking revenge as it was Fitzgerald was in his way to get his son back. So the rifle was really important to me. Alejandro wanted, I think, something a little more concrete, something with more that he felt was more substance, that he could really, and he didn't want revenge either, which is interesting because that was never his thing. Which is why we tried to construct it so that the revenge wasn't totally satisfying, because that's what it was important to Alejandro that we go that route.
As you move from that draft that you talked about earlier, the rifle being significant, the son, and then you bring Hawk into the story. If you read those drafts, like I said, you do something clever. You take one of your existing characters and then you essentially turn him into Hawk, but then you imbue Hawk with obviously more interactions with the Glass. But I found that kind of fascinating. Instead of adding a character to the script, you just transform one of your characters and then elevated his importance in the script. Was that always an original idea, or did you have to go back and forth about how does Hawk fit into the story?
Yeah, no, we butted heads a little bit. I mean, about how to do it. Whenever we knew that there was going to be a son, it was like how to fit it in and how not to, because it was always going to be a quiet film. So we didn't want a lot of talking, more characters than to have them there. We needed more dialogue, more everything. So we tried to combine in order to just condense. There's a moment where Leo, whenever he's crawling, and whenever he first sees Hawk laying there. And it's my favorite moment of his in the whole film. There's just so much in his eyes and everything, and he blinks. He doesn't give away too much. But it wouldn't be there if I'd had my version, if it had been my script. So it's one of those it was odd that it became my favorite moment of his. But if the story had kind of stayed the way that I originally planned, there is no Hawk, there is no, so it's one of those things where good things can come out of, different paths. Because I knew in some ways it was almost like a silent film, that I had to write it I had to be very descriptive with the action, and like the opening attack scene on the river. It's not one of those ones where now that tribe comes in. You know, I broke it down, and so it's probably several pages. I don't know how many pages it is.
We're surrounded! They're everywhere! No! Stay here! Stay here!
We just kind of used the script because it was all there, and that's one of the things Alejandro, he said that he liked, and I think it's why Chivo told me that it's one of the reasons he could see it, because with the moves and with what happens. So it just kind of fit perfectly for what Chivo and Alejandro wanted to do, which was put the audience in that world, right in the middle of it.
For those of you, if you're wondering who Chivo is, that's Emmanual Lubezki, the director of photography.
Get to the boat! To the boat, son! Move! Move, move! Leave the birds! Leave the birds to the boat!
There were so few opportunities for dialogue to really get character to come through, so we kept trying to find little places to do it. So in the middle of that action, we thought, okay, we can really kind of separate Glass and Fitzgerald here. We're doing it throughout, but there we kind of see completely different points of view for them, what they're after.
Grab the pail! Come on, grab the pail! Grab the pail! Come on!
The relationship between Fitzgerald and Bridger is definitely important as the film goes on, but I was really curious as to why you decided to have Fitzgerald be the one to save Bridger's life.
We went back and forth. I did it a couple early drafts too, but the reason was to give the relationship, to add another dynamic to the relationship between Bridger and Fitzgerald, so that even though Bridger knows Fitzgerald's kind of evil, bad, everything, he knows he also saved him. So there's that element that keeps him from just turning immediately on him and following him in a way, because he is a young kid who was scared in this world, and Fitzgerald had saved him once. So it kind of goes to, why is he going to stay with him? Why is he going to follow?
The Comanches, they went and took the horses, so he was starving, and he was delirious, and he crawls up into this motte, like this group of trees out there in the middle of nowhere, just sticking up in this ocean of scrub, and he found religion. At that moment, he told me he found God. And it turns out the God, he's a squirrel. Yeah, big old meaty one. I found God, he used to say. While sitting and basking in the glory and the sublimity of mercy, I shot and ate that son of a...
I mean, the way Tom played him was he just comes across as completely insane, It works from that element. Even that last look at Bridger, the look on his face is like, oh my God, do I want to go to sleep or not? I mean, it's one of those. But yeah, the point of it was just kind of to get that, another moment with them together. And rather than, which in the earlier drafts, Fitzgerald was just kind of pounding him a lot, Alejandro, and I think it was a smart thing. He didn't want Glass to be he didn't want him to always be making heroic moves. And he wanted, again, it was going to this world that is all about survival. And it's all, it's like this chain where, it fit with the theme of the people that you meet and how they help you along the way. rather than him doing it on his own, he wanted someone to help him, you know, to kind of show that, again, that this world wasn't really passable without the help of others, or without, you know. He's going through enough on his own that it kind of worked to have someone else there to kind of chip in. We just came up with this as a different way to do it, so that it was just a single warrior that he ran into, you know, rather than going dances with wolves sort of thing.
You.
We kind of combined like 3 different scenes. In earlier drafts we'd had where he'd seen the girl and he got the horses from a different place. I think, you know, even when the girl wasn't involved, when the daughter wasn't involved. But for the sake of time, because Alejandro knew this was going to be long, the way he was going to shoot it and everything. So it was we put everything together, and it's that, you know, almost the training day. I don't know if you guys, do you remember Training Day, where you know, because he helped the girl in the alley, you know, whenever he's getting ready, you know, so it kind of worked with that same sort of, you know, as far as character and motivation, and to get him to, you know, to pay off at the end. And it was like, again, trying to show where he helps her, trying to show a little bit of humanity with Glass, you know, where he'd just been kind of helped by this man that died. He could have gotten the horse and just gone on his own. And, you know, as you see him becoming almost animalistic, you know, in his survival, it's like just the little moments to draw him back to humanity.
Message.
Parochti.
No, boys.
This one was tricky because we're watching a guy that hasn't spoken almost the entire film suddenly tell us everything that we've already seen. And so it's really tricky. And that's, and it went against everything that I'd normally done. It, you know, throughout the script was just showing everything.
Bridger's telling the truth.
How's that?
Fitzgerald lied to him. He was just following orders. He wasn't there when Fitzgerald stabbed my boy to death.
Is that what happened?
We needed closure with Bridger, which we didn't get quite as much as I think we all would have liked. We had to put it into this dialogue, and this was maybe one of the toughest things to write, because Leo and I always throughout the thing was less is more. You know, for him, for Glass, his every move that he made there was a reason for it. Every word that he said, there was a reason for it. He didn't waste any emotion. So after hearing him speak so little, to come back in, it just felt like he was blah, 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 you know, and the scene was at one point 3 times longer than that. And it was just a lot of information trying to spew out. So we just kept whittling it, and I'd send him pages back and forth, and we finally got to a point where we were getting enough information because we weren't going to be able to shoot a moment with Bridger. And so, but we kind of tried to resolve everything without him just speaking so much that it seemed totally out of character. That was a huge concern for Leo.
I need a horse and a gun.
No, you need rest and something to eat. I'm going after him.
No. He'll never find him without me.
You wait till morning, he'll have a day's head start. He'll get away.
No, he won't. He's afraid. He knows how far I came for him. Same as that elk, when they get afraid, they run deep into the woods. I got him trapped, he doesn't know it yet.
How can you be so sure?
He has everything to lose. All I had was that boy. And he took him from me.
Those little moments that we stuck back in to remind the audience that it wasn't just a survival thing, but what he was really after. And so, again, touching on the stuff with Hawk and everything, just kept people in line with what he was going after.
You came all this way just for your revenge, huh? Will you enjoy it, class? 'Cause there ain't nothing gonna bring your boy back.
So you said at the beginning this story was for you was never about revenge, and,
Right.
and I was really curious with this particular ending. What was this story about for you?
It was Glass's journey, kind of learning. It's the realization that there is no satisfaction. That you're not going. It's kind of on the nose a little bit with Fitzgerald's line there, but he's not getting his son back. Regardless of what he's been through, whatever he does, he's going to he's going to suffer the pains of that loss. And so it's now, and this is Alejandro. No one gets out of these films, smiling. Any of his, it's just not his way. People are going to suffer. That life is tough, and so it's no one's ever going to accuse him of making the feel good movies of the year. That's just not his way. And so he finds those depths and tries. It's more about survival. It was trying to walk that fine line of not taking revenge, but still getting revenge. I think he knew where Fitzgerald was headed when he pushed him off.
And I think his realization there for me is he can't get what he wants. I mean, what he wants is his son back.
Right.
So I'm curious, do you feel that Glass, he doesn't get what he wants? Do you feel he gets what he needs?
I think I think that's for each person to decide. Even that last shot. Do you ask Alejandro? He won't tell you what that means. It's what it means to each person, and he loves that, And I mean, it's like, it's Birdman. What did she see when she looked out the window? It's you ask him, he will not tell you. That's very important to him, and that it's real life. That every one of us can walk into a room and see people, and we'll all have a different impression of what we're seeing, and that's what he does with film.
You've been watching A Conversation with Mark L. Smith on Story. On Story is part of a growing number of programs in Austin Film Festival's On Story project, including the On Story PBS series, now streaming online, the On Story radio program and podcast in collaboration with Public Radio International, and the On Story book series available on Amazon. To find out more about On Story and Austin Film Festival, visit onstory.tv or austinfilmfestival.com.